It is common, as life moves on, to look at one's life and question how things might have ended up had things gone a little differently. Some people may regret a relationship, or wish they'd tried a little harder to mend another, or be overwhelmed with gratitude for the right one that came along at the right time. But for some people, toward the end of their lives, this reflection goes much further beyond that, and moments before death, they wish to rid themselves of a secret they've shouldered for too long. In today's episode, we'll be exploring 2 eerie cases of murders solved by Deathbed confessions. But first, I'd like to thank Babbel for sponsoring today's episode. It goes without saying that unsolved mysteries and untold stories can be discovered all over the world, in any given city or given country, at any given time. Between nearly 200 countries across 7 continents, there are over 7,000 languages on Earth. To learn them all would be impossible, but in order to fully appreciate and understand the cultures our videos highlight, practicing the basics of a few different languages helps us navigate the scope of an investigation, no matter where it takes place, or what language someone's story is told in. To help us on this journey, we've partnered with Babbel, the #1 learning language app in the world. Babbel offers a brilliant array of ways to learn a new language, like mini-games, short stories, educational podcasts, and video clips, detailing the cultural backgrounds of whichever language you select, while featuring an incredibly simple and friendly interface. The main lessons have been built and curated by over 150 actual language teachers and experts, rather than basic AI algorithms. And if you're short on time, there's no reason to worry. Babbel is designed to help you start speaking your desired language in just 3 weeks, requiring only 10 to 15 minute commitments each day. If that sounds easy, it's because it is. To receive 65% off a Babbel subscription, use our special link in the description to access everything we've mentioned and more. Or if you just want to test the application, Babbel offers a 20-day money-back guarantee. See where Babbel can take you, just as it's helped us travel to new places while we do the things that are passionate to us and connect with people all over the world. Language is our key to experiencing so much of what Earth has to offer, and Babbel is perfect for helping you unlock your own unique perspectives. And now let's dive in with today's mysteries. Harvey Richardson. Described by the Liverpool Echo as a loner, 78-year-old Harvey Richardson appeared to have lived a fairly unextraordinary life. Born in 1930, Richardson grew up near Bolton, England. He reportedly suffered from mental health issues throughout his life, which resulted in Richardson's family being very protective of him. His mother kept him close to her up until her death in 1994. After passing, she left him a house in Wigan so he could always have a home. In 1959, Richardson moved to Liverpool to train to become a librarian. He moved away again in 1961, going to Manchester, before returning to Liverpool 8 years later. During his lifetime, he spent numerous years in Germany and had 2 daughters, and possibly a son. His aunt looked out for him as his mother's health began to deteriorate in the 90s. Richardson, a retired librarian, was 78 years old when he died from colon cancer in Wigan, 2008. Following his death, his family sent decorators to tidy up his home on Reservoir Street. It was there that workers found a brown leather satchel containing an old World War II era gun, an antique air rifle, a pair of women's underwear, and an envelope labeled Private and Confidential, alongside a series of newspaper clippings documenting the investigation into the murder of a young woman named Lorraine Jacob. Lorraine was a 19-year-old mother of 2 when she was found battered and strangled in September of 1970. Her body was found at 8 o'clock on the morning of September 2nd by bin men who discovered her in a small entry at the back of the Young Women's Christian Association in Rodney Street, Liverpool. She had spent the evening at Yates Wine Lodge in Great Charlotte Street and was spotted at a Chinese chip shop at around 10:20 p.m. 10 minutes later, witnesses saw her walking up Upper Duke Street. Lorraine was last seen walking along Pilgrim Street at 11 p.m. on September 1st. She is estimated to have died sometime between 12 and 1:30 a.m. The investigation into her murder was extensive. 900 statements were taken, and 3,500 questionnaires were put out by police around pubs, clubs, and residential homes. Initially, investigators theorized that she was killed by somebody who thought she was a sex worker, and who got angry when she rejected their advances. They also speculated that her case was linked to several other attacks on women in the area. At the time of the crime, Lorraine was living on Russell Street with her mother, her 14-month-old daughter Karen, and her baby son, Tony. Her case remained unsolved for almost 4 decades. Returning to 2008, the decorators who discovered the contents of Richardson's satchel called authorities to the scene with a feeling of unease. Investigators saw that the envelope contained a 9-page letter, its pages yellowed, undated, and unsigned. In the 26 paragraphs, Richardson detailed what had happened on the night that Lorraine Jacob was murdered. Reportedly, on the evening of September 1st, after 11 p.m., Richardson bumped into Lorraine on Pilgrim Street. The 19-year-old had bought a bag of chips following her evening out and intended on heading home. Richardson, meanwhile, had been day drinking, hopping from pub to pub after finding out he had failed his librarian exams. The pair walked down an alleyway together where an argument broke out. In a fit of rage, Richardson strangled Lorraine to death before dropping her body to the ground. He ripped off her brown tights and her underwear and took her purse from her bag before fleeing the scene. Just months before the crime occurred, in June of 1970, Lorraine and her friend had gone to the flat Richardson rented on Huskisson Street. He was out, but the two women were let into the communal area. From here, they made their way into his bedroom, where they stole 2 of his cameras. Following Lorraine's murder, a witness told the police that she had stolen the items because Richardson had taken a photo of her children. Authorities have been unable to determine when or why this photo was taken, but they don't believe it was anything sinister. When Richardson returned home, he was told that 2 women had called for him. He immediately knew who it was, but did not cross paths with Lorraine again until September 1st. During the confession, he explained that he took the young woman's purse as it contained a ticket for a pawn shop, as she had presumably gotten rid of his cameras. However, he decided not to go, and instead ripped up the ticket and flushed it down the toilet. He also cut up her small, round coin purse into pieces and threw it away, before later hanging her tights up on a branch in Sefton Park, close to the Green Hayes Road flat he had moved into after he was kicked out of his home on Huskisson Street, late July 1970. The detailed letter covered no more than 90 minutes of events, and detectives were able to corroborate as much as 90% of its contents. Much of what Richardson detailed were facts that had never been made public. Richardson was never considered a person of interest during the initial investigation, and was never tied to the crime in any way. He had no criminal record. Analysis done on the letter, however, showed that it had been written shortly after the murder. After discovering both his and Lorraine's DNA on the underwear, law enforcement announced that the 19-year-old's case was now solved and closed. They said if Richardson was still alive, they would have had enough information to press charges, and were confident he would have been convicted. In among the newspaper clippings, investigators also found an article on the murder of 18-year-old Jackie Ansel Lamb, who was killed while hitchhiking in Cheshire in 1970. However, authorities do not believe he was involved with another murder, and definitely not Jackie's, as Richardson had no car, no driver's license, and there was no other evidence to link him to the crime. Christopher Smith. On November 20th, 1975, Joan Mary Harrison, a 26-year-old mother of 2, finished her shift at St. Mary's Hostel for the Homeless in the city of Preston around lunchtime. Joan was a down-on-her-luck young woman whose life had entered a downward spiral after she became addicted to drugs and alcohol. She worked at the hostel as a cleaner on a voluntary basis and lived off the benefits she received. Prior to her addiction, Joan was described by her loved ones as a bubbly and house-proud young woman. She worked sporadically as a shop assistant, but it didn't take long for things to go awry when she started experimenting with drugs and binge drinking alcohol. Joan married young and had 2 daughters, Maxine and Denise, with her first husband. However, the marriage quickly disintegrated, and her husband died shortly afterwards. Following this, she began dating a 34-year-old man named Wilf Roach, who was considerably older than her. The couple lived together for 8 months, but it was here that Joan's addiction grew out of control, and the relationship broke down when Wilf became jealous when she began going out on the town with her sister's husband, who was a musician. He also suspected she was seeing other men, and so Joan ended things. After this, however, things only got worse for Joan. She began falling behind on her mortgage payments and eventually lost her home, as well as custody of her daughters, one of whom was given to Joan's mother. Following this, she married Paul Raymond Harrison, a carpet fitter from the Ribbleton district of Preston. However, later, after Joan's death, he told detectives that the couple hadn't actually lived together for 2 years. Reportedly, their relationship had soured due to her struggles with addiction. Shortly before her death, Joan lived in several different bedsits before she met a 47-year-old landlord named David Keithley. The couple were due to get married the following June. He later spoke of his love for Joan and how he tried to provide her with a stable home, but that she continued to spiral downwards. By this point, Joan had ended up in court on several occasions for petty crimes, including once stealing £51 worth of items from her older sister, the modern-day equivalent of around £439, or $600. Additionally, she was caught forging a drug prescription. Returning to November 20th, 1975, following Joan's lunch with her colleagues, she returned to the hostel to lie down for a bit before finally going home to her fiancé, David Keithley. However, at 10:20 p.m., she left the house again, walking the dimly lit streets to the town centre so she could get something to drink. Joan was last seen alive at 10:30 p.m., wearing a light green 3/4 length coat with a faux fur collar and brown calf-length suede boots while walking along Church Street. It wasn't until the following day that the 26-year-old was reported missing when she didn't turn up for her shift at the hostel. At 8 a.m., her body was found by a mother of 5 when the door to a derelict garage on Berwick Road, Avenham, blew open. Joan's body was face down in a pile of blood, and the crime was a particularly horrific one. She had been beaten to death and severely sexually assaulted before dying. There was a bite mark on her left breast, and several of her belongings were missing, including her 2 gold wedding bands from her previous marriages, the engagement ring from David, numerous bracelets, and her purse and handbag. Her gold chain and hoop earrings had been left intact. Following the discovery of the body, detectives found Joan's empty purse and handbag at different intervals, as if they'd been tossed away by the killer as they left the scene. During the initial investigation, house-to-house searches were conducted, and men were asked to spit into a jar so that police officers could observe their teeth and see if anyone matched with the bite mark found on Joan's body. Additionally, the semen left at the scene showed that the killer had a rare blood type, something which would help detectives later on in the inquiry. The investigation into Joan's death was difficult for investigators, as so much of her life took place in the seedier areas of town, and many of the people she socialized with were alcoholics themselves, who had intense memory problems that often led to them not even knowing what they had done the day before. David Keithley was quickly ruled out of the investigation, as he had a watertight alibi, and Wilf Roach was looked into as well. However, he too was eventually eliminated from the inquiry, as his DNA did not match the perpetrators. During the course of the investigation, 80 detectives were put on the case, 6,000 saliva samples were taken, and nearly 100,000 people were interviewed. Police even had a young man drunkenly confess to the murder, but again, he was proven not to be involved. Despite the efforts of the police, Joan's case grew cold. For some time, it was believed that Joan was the victim of Peter Sutcliffe, also known as the Yorkshire Ripper, but all was revealed in 2011 when the DNA from the crime scene was matched to a 60-year-old man named Christopher Smith. Smith's DNA had been taken in 2008 when he was caught drink driving. He was dying of lung cancer at the time and passed away just 6 days later. Interestingly, Smith had a lengthy criminal history and had been charged and convicted for numerous offences, including assault, theft, and sex attacks. Likely knowing that the truth would be uncovered, Smith wrote a 3-page letter the day before he died and left it at his home for investigators to find. He wrote, quote, "To whoever it concerns, I would like to put the record straight. I can't go on with the guilt. I have lived with it for over 20 years. I am truly sorry for all the pain I have caused to everyone. I cannot go back to prison anymore. I have been out of trouble for over 20 years, so please, God help me. I am so sorry. God forgive me. Throughout the letter, Smith confesses to the murder of Joan. There was no evidence that Smith knew Joan, and he likely came across her by chance following his release from prison in the area. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and reactions, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.